The valley never asked for company, it simply waited, and the man who lived within it had stopped listening for anything but the wind. Years had slipped past like dry leaves, unnoticed, unsentimental. His boots had walked the same dirt for so long, the land no longer crunched beneath him. It sighed. The ranch stood like a forgotten hymn. Weathered timbers, slanted roof, fence barely clinging to itself in crooked stretches. Behind it, a cottonwood tree leaned westward, and beneath that tree, a modest grave, just one. The stone was rough, no flowers, just wind dot each morning. The man rose before light, not from ambition, but because sleep no longer held him. He fed the hens, milked the goats, patched what little could be patched, and when the work no longer needed doing, he sat on the porch, boots spread wide, head dipped low, and let the hours carry him like a current too lazy to drown. He didn't speak much. Even the crows had stopped bothering. Ears had settled inside him like dust, quiet, thick, unmoving. The locals in town called him a ghost who forgot to lie down. Some said he'd gone better after losing his wife. Others swore he'd always been strange. But the truth was simpler. He had loved her. She died birthing a child that never drew breath. And he never forgave the world for asking him to keep living. That morning had started like any other. Pale light poured slowly over the wheat-colored hills, soft as breath. He saddled the old horse, a tired gray named Blue, who didn't seem to mind the loneliness, and they trotted the south fence, checking posts. Some had split during last week's dry wind. He moved without thought, hammer in hand, wood beneath fingers. But when he stood, sweat on his brow, he saw it dot smoked out thin, blue-gray, rising far off from the eastern ridge, not thick enough for fire, just a ribbon in the sky, the kind lit by cooking or warmth dot too far to be town, too close to be ignored dot still. He didn't move toward it, just spat into the dust and muttered something only the land could hear. The afternoon folded in, like a tired blanket. Clouds stretched long and low, painted in bruises and sun glow. The man returned to the porch, boots heavy with soil, arms lined in sweat. He poured water into a tin cup, let it run over, then drank without wiping his lips. His eyes drifted toward the ridge again, narrowing beneath the brim of his old hat. That's when he saw them dot figures, 6 of them, moving slow, walking the long road that wound through the valley, the one most folks forgot even existed, barefoot or near to it, dresses torn, hair tangled by wind and time. One carried a small satchel slung across her back, another limped. Dust clung to their legs like guilt. They reached the gate just as the light began to fade. None of them spoke, not a word. Instead, they knelt, all 6, right there in the dirt, heads bowed, hands folded. He stood, his frame stiff from hours of labor and years of solitude. One step forward, then another. The tallest girl, no more than 20 if he had to guess, pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and held it out with trembling fingers. He didn't take it, not yet. His eyes moved across them, one by one, not as a man surveying beauty, but as a soul confused by living ghosts. Their faces were tired, hollow, but not weak. There was something in them, fire maybe, or the last pieces of something that had almost been stolen, but clung on anyway. He reached for the letter. The ink had smudged in places, water streaked from God knows what, sweat, rain, or tears. To whoever reads this, I beg you, these girls have done no wrong. The world has failed them. They were sent to a house under my church's name that turned out to be no house at all. I could not keep them here. There's nowhere left. But I knew of your place, your silence. I asked not for kindness, only safety, shelter, time. If they've reached you, then God is still watching. May he watch over you too. It was signed by a preacher, one whose name he remembered faintly, a man who came through once, years back, selling Bibles out of a wagon and crying at his own sermons. The rancher let the letter fall to his side. He looked down again. The girls did not rise. One of them, the youngest maybe, trembled slightly. Another had a bruise blooming like ink across her temple. He didn't ask where they'd come from, didn't ask what had happened. He just turned and opened the gate. He didn't offer words. They didn't expect them. Silence had become a shared language inside the house. He cleared a space near the hearth, pointed to a jug of water, left a stack of folded linens on the edge of the table. They didn't ask whose they were, didn't ask if they could stay, just moved slowly, carefully, like deer unsure if the clearing was safe. The youngest girl sat nearest the fire, legs folded tight, another curled against the wall. Already drifting to sleep, the tallest one helped tend to the one who limped, and the man. He stepped outside. The stars had begun their slow dance above the plains. He walked to the grave, stood for a while, not speaking. He never did. Just watched the wind tug at the weeds and wondered if she'd be angry or proud, maybe both. Inside, the fire crackled gently. It was the first time in years the ranch held more than one heartbeat, and the man, the one the town called bitter, strange, cursed, sat on the porch, elbows on knees, and listened to the sound of soft breathing drifting through wood and window pane. He didn't know what would come next, didn't need to. Some things didn't ask permission to begin. They just arrived, dust-covered, wordless, kneeling in the dirt, and reminded you that not all things lost stay buried. The days stretched longer after the girls came, not in hours, but in weight, in meaning, in movement. Where once the ranch had moved like an old clock winding toward silence, it now pulsed, gently and unsteadily, like a body remembering how to breathe. They never asked for much. Not space, not comfort, not even safety. They moved through the house like ghosts made of hope, soft-footed, careful not to touch more than needed. But they touched everything, not with hands, with presence. The first change came that second. Morning, the rancher rose, same as always, before the sun, expecting quiet. But from the barn came the gentle thud of hay bales being moved. A girl, the one with dark hair that curled tight behind her ears, was feeding the goats. Bare-armed and half asleep, she didn't see him at first. She was humming, not a song he recognized, but one that held sorrow the way old cotton holds the scent of fire. She didn't stop when she saw him, just nodded once and kept going out by noon. The chicken coop had been clean, neater than he'd ever kept it. A bucket of eggs sat waiting on the porch. He didn't say a word. The others followed in quiet rhythm. One scrubbed the kitchen walls. Another patched a rip in the window curtain. They found a broken step near the front stoop and nailed it back with nails rusted. From years unused in the shed, a few worked in silence. One laughed, just once, a short, sharp sound like something that escaped before it could be swallowed. At night, they gathered by the hearth. They braided each other's hair with fingers rough from dust. One of them, young and sharp-eyed, read aloud from a Bible she kept wrapped in cloth. She didn't preach, just read, low and steady, like she was trying to believe it all over. Again, the rancher sat outside those nights, always just far enough to be unseen, but close enough to hear the fire crackle. He wasn't sure why. Habit, maybe, or hunger, not the kind food could solve. A different kind, the kind you forget you carry, until the scent of fresh bread breaks your bones open again. There was one girl who didn't do much work. She sat by the grave. Every day, she didn't cry, just sat with her knees folded and her hands clasped. One morning she left something there, a wildflower, pulled from the ridge above the creek bed, a stubborn thing with white petals and a crooked stem. He didn't touch it, just stared a long while and tipped his hat, like she could see him by the end of the week. The windmill was turning again. They had climbed it, 3 of them, barefoot and reckless, laughing as they found the jammed blade and forced it loose. He watched from the porch, heart somewhere between panic and admiration, when it began to spin. Water flowed into the trough like it had remembered its own name. That night, they cooked, not just stew, but real food, soft biscuits, a pot of beans spiced with something sweet, and fresh eggs fried golden at the edges. He didn't sit with them, not then. But he didn't eat alone either. He found himself pausing in doorways more, often watching, listening. One girl had a voice like wet velvet. She sang when she thought no one heard. Another drew with charcoal on the back of old feed sacks. Quiet sketches of horses, birds, hens. A third made a game of skipping small stones across the basin behind the barn. She whispered names as she threw them, like each one carried a memory too heavy to say aloud. None of them asked about him, none of them pried. But when he walked by, they stepped aside, not out of fear, but quiet respect, and when he grunted, or pointed, or gave short nods, they seemed to understand more than most folks had in years. Sometimes, at dusk, he'd find himself remembering, not in sharp pictures, but in feelings. His wife had once sat where they sat now. Her laughter was lower, her strength quieter, but she had the same defiance, the same fire in her silence. One of the girls reminded him of how she used to speak with her eyes alone. Another reminded him of her anger when fences snapped in spring, and one moved like her, with purpose, with grace wrapped in steel. The past didn't haunt him anymore. It lingered down like a song he wasn't ready to stop hearing. Then came the man from town, rode up unannounced, dust on his boots, a smirk under his mustache, didn't even knock. He leaned on the gate like he owned it, eyes scanning the girls with the greed of someone who thinks the world owes him beauty. Didn't think you turned your place into a sanctuary? He muttered, half laughing, half spitting the words. The rancher didn't rise from the porch. They ain't your kin, ain't your business, and sure as hell ain't your burden. The man tilted his head. You know what they're saying, don't you? About you housing lost girls out here. Half the town thinks you've gone mad. Other half thinks you've. He never finished the sentence. The rancher stood slowly, deliberately, and said only this. They stay. The man didn't linger long after that. Kicked up dust and rode off, muttering something under his breath that the prairie didn't care to keep. The girls had heard every word, but they didn't ask for reassurance, didn't plead, didn't explain themselves. That night, they cooked again, and this time, when the pot was warm and the plates were laid, the rancher stepped inside. The girls stiffened, unsure. He pulled out the chair at the far end of the table, the chair that hadn't been moved in years, and he sat. Silence held the room for a long moment. Then one of them, the quiet one, the one with the wrapped Bible in the gentlest hands, walked over, cup in hand, coffee, black. Hot. She placed it in front of him. Her fingers brushed the rim as she set it down. They shook, just slightly, and he looked up at her, not past her, not through her, at her. He said it softly, barely above the crackle of fire and the creak of old wood. Thank you. And though no one smiled, something shifted in the floorboards in the air and the breath between them all. The dust of the valley no longer seemed so dry. Out of the six, one rose quieter than the rest. Not shy, not afraid, but deliberate. The kind of quiet that came from surviving something you don't talk about. She didn't ask where things were. She found them. Didn't wait for permission. Just moved early, before dawn, when the sky was bruised lavender and the only sound was the breath of the earth waking up. She was the first to pick up a post-hole digger when the fence buckled near the east line, first to carry feed down the long trail to the cattle pasture, first to strip off her shoes and wade into the icy stream to fish out a stuck branch. Clogging the irrigation, the others called her nothing. No names between them, just glances, nods. They understood. She bore a scar beneath her chin, pale and jagged like the edge of cracked glass. Another ran across the side of her palm, old and silvery, seen only when she reached out to feed the hens. But it was the way she moved that told more than scars ever could, steady, silent, alert, as if waiting for the world to try again. The rancher noticed. He didn't say it, but he lingered longer when she worked near, not out of want, but recognition. Pain recognizes its own. They began to work together by accident. A fallen beam in the barn. He was lifting one end when she appeared on the other. No words, just her hands, bare and bruised, finding the weight. Another morning, a rusted latch broke clean off the tool shed. She brought him wire, without being asked. By the time the storm came, they moved like muscle and bone, separate but linked. The sky turned the color of spilled ink, and the wind howled like it remembered every sin of every man who had touched this land. Rain crashed sideways, carving lines into the dust like veins in stone. The roof leaked, not just drips, full sheets of water where the old tin curled at the edges. He grabbed a tarp. She followed up on the roof, soaked and shivering. She held the corner while he knelt. She didn't flinch at thunder, didn't cry out when the ladder slipped slightly beneath them. They didn't speak, but their silence was louder than most men's screaming. By the time they climbed down, breathless and muddy, something unspoken had been built. Not love, not yet, but understanding. It was 2 days later when the glove scene happened. She was reinforcing the outer gate. A stubborn nail twisted sideways beneath her grip. It split the wood and her hand. All in one breath, blood bloomed fast across her knuckles. He saw it from the porch and was beside her in moments. She looked at him like she was about to say she was fine, the way people who've always had to be fine say it, but he said nothing, just took off his own flannel, tore a strip from the hem, fingers shaking slightly. He wrapped her hand with a gentleness that didn't match his callous frame, tight enough to hold, loose enough not to hurt. Her eyes, storm-colored and unreadable, rose to his for the first time. They didn't look like a warning. They looked like thanks, or maybe surrender. Not to him. To safety. After that, they began to share coffee in silence, mornings, evenings, by the window. Sometimes, when the wind blew colder than expected, she'd bring the cups, always without cream, and sit across from him without ceremony. They didn't always look at each other, but they didn't have to. Comfort isn't noise, it's presence. One night, while the other sang soft hymns by lantern light, she sat by the fire alone. He joined her, sat a few feet away, closer than usual. They didn't speak for a long while. Then, barely louder than the crackling flame, she whispered, "I've never felt safe until now." He looked at her, not with pity, but with something like mourning, not for her, but for what the world had done to someone who should have never had to say those words. After that, he watched her more carefully, not as a man watches a woman, but as a man watches the thing he's afraid to break or lose. Once, he saw her asleep on the porch, curled beside her sisters. The wind had picked up, cold, unforgiving. He walked outside, coat in hand, laid it gently across her shoulders. She stirred, slightly, but didn't wake. He stepped back, and for the first time in years, he let himself believe that some things, even shattered things, could become whole again. But peace doesn't last forever. Not in the Wild West. Rumors ride faster than horses. And soon, a man came. He arrived late, boots polished and smiles sharp, rode a black gelding to clean for real work, said he was looking for a girl, didn't say her name, didn't have to, described her to well. "You've got someone here that don't belong to you," he said, voice oily as lantern smoke. The rancher didn't move from the barn post where he stood. The man continued, "She's promised. Came from money, see, family back east. Meant to be wed, ran off like a stray. Been chasing her since Oklahoma." The rancher said nothing. The man leaned in, voice lower. "I'm not here for a fight, friend, but I'll take her with me, one way or another. She's worth something, and I've waited long enough." Still, no words from the rancher. Just the slow, deliberate sound of a blade being sharpened behind the barn that night. And the rancher, he stood outside her door till the sun came up. The next morning, she found the fresh grave, dug beside the wife's. The earth was loose. The shovel leaned against a post. She didn't ask. Not at first, but later, after breakfast, she walked up behind him as he was chopping wood. Her voice barely rose above the wind. "Who's the grave for?" He didn't turn, didn't flinch, just let the axe rest against the stump and whispered, "No one yet, but I won't let anyone take you." She didn't cry, didn't speak, but something in her posture changed, less guarded, more rooted. Like maybe she believed him. It was the last week of autumn when they came back. The trees had dropped their gold, and frost kissed the barn roof in the mornings. The girls had taken to knitting scarves with old yarn, their laughter quiet but freer. Evenings were slower now, softer, safer, but peace never stays long in places where violence once lingered. It came in the sound of hooves, 3 riders, broad silhouettes etched against the dying light. The same man from before, this time flanked by 2 others, one tall and grinning, the other hunched and mean-eyed. They rode without hesitation, kicking up dust like they had the right to it. The rancher heard them before he saw them. He stepped off the porch, jaw tight, hands empty. But he didn't need weapons. He had made his decision days ago. They reined up at the gate. The leader dismounted first. "We came to collect," he said, voice oily as ever. The rancher didn't answer. She was promised. The man continued, stepping forward. "A bride, paid for and spoken for. Her old man made a deal, and I intend to keep it. She belongs with me, still." The rancher stood silent. Then, finally, one sentence carved slow and steady. "She's free now." The man laughed, loud and ugly. The others joined in. "You gone soft in your old age, huh?" one said. "Living out here with your pretty little herd, playing preacher." The rancher said nothing, but he didn't move. Behind him, a sound of boots. 6 pairs, the girls. They walked forward, not hiding, not trembling. One held a frying pan. Another, a pitchfork. The tallest, had her fist clenched like she'd been waiting her whole life for this. They stood behind him, not as hostages, but as a wall. The man's laughter faded. The rancher's eyes, calm but fixed, never left his. You think this means something, the man said. You think they'll fight for you, for her? The rancher didn't flinch, didn't blink. You won't take her, he said, not loud, just final. The taller thug spat in the dirt. The leader stared a moment longer, and something in the rancher's face, not fury, not threat, but the stillness of a man who's already buried one life and won't bury another, made him falter. He grunted, then turned. Keep your damn strays. He spat over his shoulder. They mounted. The horses turned. Dust rose again, and they were gone. The girls didn't speak, not for a long time. Then one of them, the youngest, leaned the frying pan against her skirt and started crying. The sound cracked through the air like wind over. Bone the others followed her back inside, all but one, the girl he had stood for. She stayed frozen. He didn't reach for her, didn't speak, just sat slowly on the porch step, knees aching, breath heavy. After a minute, she joined him, folded herself beside him, like ash curling beside flame. She didn't look at him when she said it. I kept thinking he'd never stop coming. He didn't respond, just sat. Let her speak, or not. Even if you said no, I thought maybe no one would ever mean it. Still, silence. But it held her, like shelter. Then, softer. Why did you dig that grave? He looked out toward the fields, toward the cottonwood tree. Because I'd rather bury the man I used to be than ever let someone take you back. Later, inside, firelight flickered against the log walls. The others were quiet, half asleep, bundled in warmth. She sat beside him near the hearth. The room smelled like pine and coffee. She asked about the other grave. He told her, not all at once, just enough, that she had laughed in the kitchen when the rain came, that she never got to hold the child, that he thought love had died with her, and he'd buried himself beside her without the shovel. The girl listened, didn't interrupt. Then she said, you didn't save me. He blinked. You just reminded me I was worth saving. Winter came and stayed. The ranch didn't slow. It evolved. One girl turned the pantry into a bakery, sourdough, biscuits, jam from whatever berries the hills hadn't taken. Another built a bench from scrap wood, carving flowers into its sides. The one who had once wrapped herself around the Bible began mending old coats and boots, giving each pair away to passers-by who never asked questions. They weren't just surviving, they were becoming. The ranch no longer echoed. It sang. Spring brought wildflowers. Tiny, defiant things, soft purples, weary whites. They grew in places where nothing had bloomed for years, and one evening, the girl, now a woman, knelt beside the grave beneath the cottonwood. Not the new one, the old one, the one with no name carved, just love etched in the soil. She pressed a seed into the dirt. Wildflowers. Her fingers were steady. The rancher came up behind her, watched, not intruding. She didn't turn when she said it. I don't want to go. He waited, not because I owe you, not because I'm broken. She looked up, then. Her eyes didn't ask permission, they offered truth. I just want to stay, beside you, if that's still all right. He didn't nod. Not right. Away. Just knelt beside her, and when she reached for his hand, he let her take it. For the first time in years, the rancher wept, not for grief, not for guilt, but for something returned. A life. Sometimes a man could live years without living at all, not because he's dead, but because something inside him stopped blooming. And sometimes it only takes 6 souls, broken, brave, and beautiful, to bring the wind back to the valley. If you've been alone a long time, maybe love's not gone. Maybe it's just been waiting on the other side of the gate.